My sister convinced me to secretly record my mother-in-law's phone conversations while she stayed with us for 2 weeks. But when I finally listened to those recordings, what I discovered didn't just expose family secrets. It revealed a truth about love, sacrifice, and forgiveness that completely transformed how I understood the meaning of family loyalty and the power of seeing beyond surface conflicts to deeper truths. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The sound of breaking glass echoed through our kitchen at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning, followed immediately by my mother-in-law's sharp intake of breath and my own suppressed sigh of frustration. This marked the third dish Elena Rodriguez had accidentally broken since arriving at our Portland home 6 days earlier, and I could feel my patience wearing dangerously thin. "I am so sorry, mija," Elena said in her heavily accented English, immediately dropping to her knees to collect the scattered pieces of what had been my favorite ceramic coffee mug, the one David had given me for our second anniversary, hand-painted with tiny sunflowers that reminded him of my smile during our early dating days. "It's fine, Elena," I replied, though my voice carried an edge I couldn't quite suppress. I moved quickly to help gather the fragments, more to prevent her from cutting herself than out of any genuine desire to clean up yet another mess. These things happen. But they weren't just happening. They were happening constantly, relentlessly, and always seemed to involve something meaningful to me. The previous day, she had somehow managed to shrink my cashmere sweater in the washing machine, despite my explicit instructions about delicate cycle settings. 2 days before that, she had reorganized my entire spice cabinet according to some system that made sense only to her, leaving me unable to find basic ingredients when attempting to prepare dinner for David's colleagues. My husband David emerged from his home office, drawn by the sound of our morning catastrophe. At 34, he maintained the same lean build and easy smile that had attracted me during our graduate school years at Oregon State University. However, recently that smile had been strained whenever he found himself mediating between his mother and me, which seemed to occur with increasing frequency since Elena's arrival. "What happened?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Just a small accident," Elena responded before I could speak, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she deposited ceramic shards into the trash receptacle. At 68, Elena moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had endured decades of physical labor, first in the strawberry fields near Salinas, and later in the commercial kitchens of 3 different restaurants, where she had worked to support David's education. "Mom, you don't need to clean up every single piece," David said gently, kneeling beside his mother. "Sarah and I can handle this." The way he immediately prioritized his mother's comfort over acknowledging my obvious frustration struck me as emblematic of the dynamic that had been developing since Elena's arrival. David seemed incapable of recognizing that his mother's presence was creating genuine stress in our previously harmonious household routine. Elena had come to stay with us while recovering from minor surgery to repair a hernia that had been causing her significant discomfort for months. The procedure itself had been successful, but her doctor recommended a 2-week recovery period, with minimal physical exertion and someone available to assist with daily activities. Since David's sister Carmen lived in San Diego with 3 young children and worked full-time as a nurse, the responsibility naturally fell to us. I had agreed to the arrangement without hesitation, genuinely wanting to help someone who had sacrificed tremendously to ensure David's educational and professional success. Elena had worked multiple jobs throughout David's childhood and adolescence, often returning home exhausted after 12-hour shifts, only to help him with homework or attend his school events. Her dedication had enabled David to become the first person in his family to graduate from college, eventually earning his doctorate in environmental engineering and securing his current position with a prestigious consulting firm. My admiration for Elena's sacrifices was sincere and profound. However, living with her had proven more challenging than I had anticipated, not because of her recovery needs, which were minimal, but because of the subtle ways our household dynamics had shifted since her arrival. Elena's presence seemed to transform David into a different version of himself, more deferential, more traditional in his expectations about gender roles, and less attentive to maintaining the egalitarian partnership we had cultivated during our 5 years of marriage. He began expecting me to take primary responsibility for cooking, cleaning, and entertaining his mother, apparently assuming these duties fell naturally within my domain as the woman of the household. These expectations felt particularly jarring because our marriage had been characterized by shared domestic responsibilities and mutual respect for each other's professional demands. I worked as a marketing director for a sustainable fashion company, a position that required significant travel and irregular hours. David had always been supportive of my career ambitions, often handling household tasks when my schedule became demanding. However, since Elena's arrival, David seemed to revert to patterns from his childhood, where his mother had managed all domestic affairs, while he focused exclusively on his studies and later his career. He appeared genuinely surprised when I expressed frustration about shouldering additional household responsibilities, as if caring for his mother should naturally bring me joy rather than creating additional stress. The cultural dimensions of our situation added layers of complexity that I struggled to navigate diplomatically. Elena's English, while functional, was limited enough that meaningful conversations between us were difficult. She often reverted to rapid Spanish when feeling frustrated or emotional, leaving me completely unable to understand her concerns or respond appropriately. More significantly, Elena's traditional Mexican cultural values sometimes conflicted with the more progressive relationship dynamics David and I had established. She seemed bewildered by my career focus, often making comments about how nice it would be when David and I started having children so I could stay home and focus on family responsibilities. These comments were delivered without malicious intent, but they highlighted fundamental differences in our perspectives about women's roles, family priorities, and life fulfillment. Elena had found deep meaning and satisfaction in supporting her family through domestic labor and child-rearing, but her assumptions that I would naturally desire the same path felt restrictive and invalidating. The breaking glass incident that Tuesday morning represented more than just another accident. It symbolized my growing sense that Elena's presence was fragmenting the careful balance David and I had created in our shared life. Each small disruption felt magnified by my underlying frustration about the changed household dynamics and David's apparent inability to recognize my perspective. After we finished cleaning the ceramic fragments, I retreated to our bedroom to prepare for my workday, hoping that some time away from the house would help me regain perspective and patience. However, I found myself replaying the morning's events and questioning whether my reactions were reasonable or whether I was becoming an unreasonable person who resented an elderly woman's presence during her time of need. The internal conflict was exhausting. I genuinely wanted to be compassionate and supportive toward Elena, but I also felt increasingly resentful about the ways her presence had disrupted our household equilibrium. I questioned whether my frustrations reflected character flaws, cultural insensitivity, or legitimate concerns about relationship dynamics that needed to be addressed. My sister Jessica called while I was driving to work, providing an opportunity to voice concerns I had been reluctant to share with David. Jessica lived in Seattle with her husband and 2 teenagers, maintaining enough distance from our daily life to offer perspective while remaining close enough to understand family dynamics. "How are things going with Elena?" Jessica asked after we exchanged usual pleasantries about work and weather. "It's complicated," I admitted, describing the morning's broken mug incident and my growing frustration with the household dynamics since Elena's arrival. Jessica listened without interrupting, occasionally making sympathetic sounds that encouraged me to continue. "It sounds like you're walking on eggshells in your own home," Jessica observed. "That must be incredibly stressful, especially when you're trying to be helpful and supportive." Her validation felt both relieving and concerning. Relieving because it confirmed that my experiences were understandable rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. Concerning because it suggested that the situation might not resolve naturally as Elena's recovery progressed. "The thing is, I don't think David sees what's happening," I continued. "He seems to think everything is going fine, and any problems are just minor adjustments we need to make temporarily." "Men can be remarkably oblivious to household dynamics," Jessica replied, "especially when their mothers are involved. There's something about the mother-son relationship that can make grown men revert to childhood patterns without realizing it." Her observation resonated with my own sense that David's behavior had regressed since Elena's arrival, The competent, emotionally intelligent partner I had married seemed to have been replaced by someone who expected traditional gender roles and failed to recognize my legitimate concerns about household dynamics. "Have you tried talking to David directly about how you're feeling?" Jessica asked. "I've hinted around the edges, but I don't want to seem like I'm complaining about his mother when she's recovering from surgery," I explained. "It feels petty to focus on broken dishes and reorganize spice cabinets when she's dealing with health issues. But it's not really about the dishes, is it?" Jessica said perceptively. "It's about feeling like your voice doesn't matter in your own home, and your husband doesn't recognize that supporting his mother has created additional burdens for you." Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. The broken dishes and household disruptions were symptoms of a deeper issue about respect, partnership, and the distribution of emotional labor within our marriage. Elena's presence had revealed fault lines in our relationship that I hadn't previously recognized. "What would you do in my situation?" I asked, genuinely seeking guidance from someone whose judgment I trusted. Jessica was quiet for several moments before responding. "This might sound strange, but I think you need more information before you can make good decisions about how to handle this." "What kind of information?" "Information about what Elena really thinks about you, your marriage, and the situation. You're making assumptions about her motivations and feelings, but you don't actually know what she thinks because of the language barrier and cultural differences." Her suggestion intrigued me. I had been interpreting Elena's actions through my own cultural lens, and assuming that her intentions were either benign or mildly critical. However, Jessica was right that I lacked direct insight into Elena's actual thoughts and feelings about our living arrangement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "How would I get that information?" I asked. "Well," Jessica said with a slightly mischievous tone, "Elena talks on the phone with Carmen every evening, right? In Spanish?" "Yes, usually for about an hour before dinner." "And you don't understand Spanish, so you have no idea what they're discussing?" "Right. I assume they're talking about her recovery and family news." "But what if they're talking about you? What if Elena is sharing her real thoughts about living in your house, your marriage, your cooking, your housekeeping, your personality?" The possibility hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. If I were staying in someone else's home for 2 weeks, I would certainly be sharing my observations and experiences with my closest family members. Elena's conversations with Carmen probably provided the most honest window into her actual perspective about our situation. "Are you suggesting I should eavesdrop on their phone calls?" I asked, feeling both intrigued and uncomfortable with the ethical implications. "I'm suggesting you should know what's being said about you in your own home," Jessica replied. "Elena has every right to share her feelings with Carmen, but you have a right to understand how your hospitality is being received and whether Elena's presence is temporary or represents a longer-term change in your household dynamics." Her logic was compelling, even though the proposed method felt questionable. If Elena was indeed sharing critical observations about me with Carmen, those conversations might explain some of the tension I was experiencing and provide guidance about how to address the situation more effectively. "How would I even do something like that?" I asked. "Your phone probably has a voice recording app," Jessica suggested. "You could just leave it running when she makes her evening calls. Most phones can record for hours without any problem." Quote. The conversation concluded with Jessica encouraging me to consider whether understanding Elena's actual thoughts might help me respond more appropriately to our situation. I spent the remainder of my drive to work contemplating the ethical and practical aspects of her suggestion. Recording Elena's private conversations felt invasive and potentially harmful to family relationships. However, the alternative was continuing to navigate a situation where I lacked crucial information about how my presence and actions were being perceived by someone living in my home. By the time I reached my office, I had convinced myself that Jessica's suggestion, while unconventional, might provide the clarity I needed to either address legitimate concerns or recognize that my frustrations were unfounded and required personal adjustment rather than external changes. That evening, as Elena settled into her usual spot on our living room couch for her daily call with Carmen, I made a decision that would fundamentally change my understanding of family, sacrifice, and the complex motivations that drive human behavior. I quietly activated the voice recording application on my smartphone and placed it discreetly on the bookshelf near Elena's favorite chair, close enough to capture clear audio but hidden enough to avoid detection. The ethical weight of my decision felt heavy, but my need for understanding felt heavier. What I would discover in those recordings would challenge every assumption I had made about Elena's motivations, David's family dynamics, and my own capacity for compassion and forgiveness. The truth, when it finally emerged, would be far more complex and beautiful than the simple narrative of cultural conflict and household tension I had been living with for the past week. The breaking point, I would later understand, was not the moment when Elena broke my favorite mug. It was the moment when I chose to seek truth rather than remain comfortable with ignorance, setting in motion a series of discoveries that would transform my understanding of what it means to truly love and be loved by family. The weight of the smartphone in my hand felt heavier than its actual physical mass as I stood in our hallway Wednesday evening, listening to Elena's animated Spanish conversation drifting from the living room. 24 hours had passed since my conversation with Jessica, and the internal debate about recording Elena's phone calls had consumed my thoughts throughout the workday. The ethical implications of my proposed action felt increasingly complex the more I examined them. Recording someone's private conversations without their knowledge violated fundamental principles of trust and respect that formed the foundation of healthy relationships. Elena was a guest in our home, recovering from surgery, and entitled to privacy during her communications with her daughter. However, the alternative was continuing to navigate a situation where crucial information remained hidden, potentially leading to misunderstandings, resentment, and damaged family relationships. If Elena was indeed sharing critical observations about me with Carmen, those conversations might contain insights that could help me understand and address the source of our household tensions more effectively. The moral complexity deepened when I considered the broader context of our situation. Elena's limited English meant that meaningful direct communication between us was nearly impossible. Cultural differences created additional barriers to understanding her perspective and motivations. Without access to her honest thoughts and feelings, I was forced to interpret her actions through my own cultural lens, potentially missing important nuances that could explain our interpersonal difficulties. My professional background in marketing had taught me the importance of gathering accurate information before making strategic decisions. Assumptions and projections often led to costly mistakes that could have been avoided through better research and understanding of stakeholder perspectives. Applying this principle to my family situation suggested that seeking additional information about Elena's actual thoughts might be prudent rather than invasive. The internal debate continued as I prepared dinner, while Elena concluded her phone conversation with Carmen. David arrived home from work during my food preparation, greeting his mother warmly in Spanish before transitioning to English for my benefit. The ease with which he moved between languages highlighted another dimension of my isolation within our current household dynamics. "How was your day, Mom?" David asked, settling beside Elena on the couch while I continued cooking in the adjacent kitchen. "Very peaceful," Elena replied in her careful English. "I rested much today and feel stronger." "And Sarah took good care of you?" "Yes, she is very attentive." The pause before attentive struck me as significant, though I could not determine whether it reflected Elena's search for the correct English word or a more meaningful hesitation about her actual assessment of my care. These moments of linguistic uncertainty had been occurring throughout her stay, leaving me constantly wondering whether communication difficulties were masking deeper relationship issues. During dinner, I found myself studying Elena's expressions and body language for clues about her unspoken thoughts and feelings. She seemed comfortable and relaxed in our home, participating in conversation when directly addressed but often appearing lost in private contemplation. Her interactions with David were warm and natural, reflecting their close mother-son bond that had developed over decades of shared struggle and mutual support. Her interactions with me were polite but more reserved, lacking the easy familiarity that characterized her exchanges with David. This difference could be attributed to our shorter relationship history, language barriers, or cultural differences about appropriate boundaries between women from different generations. However, it could also reflect more specific concerns about my personality, behavior, or suitability as David's wife. After dinner, David excused himself to handle work emails in his home office, leaving Elena and me alone together for the first time that day. She began clearing dishes, despite my protests that she should rest while recovering from surgery. Her insistence on helping with household tasks had been a consistent pattern since her arrival, creating situations where I felt awkward about accepting assistance from someone who was supposedly convalescing. "Elena, please sit down," I said, gently taking plates from her hands. "You're supposed to be resting." "I cannot sit and watch you work alone," she replied, her accent making the words sound more formal than conversational English. "This is not right for me." Her response reflected values about hospitality, reciprocity, and gender roles that differed from my own cultural background, but were deeply meaningful within her worldview. Elena had been raised in a tradition where women demonstrated care and respect through domestic service, and being prevented from contributing to household labor likely felt uncomfortable or inappropriate to her. However, her insistence on helping also created pressure for me to either accept assistance from someone who should be resting or engage in continuous negotiations about household responsibilities. Neither option felt entirely satisfactory, contributing to the underlying tension that had been building throughout her stay. As Elena settled into her evening routine, I retreated to our bedroom to continue wrestling with my decision about recording her phone conversations. The rational arguments on both sides felt equally compelling, leaving me in a state of paralysis that prevented forward progress while intensifying my stress about our household dynamics. I decided to call my mother, hoping that her perspective might provide clarity about the ethical and practical dimensions of my situation. Margaret Williams had always been someone I could turn to for balanced advice that considered both emotional and logical factors in complex decision-making situations. "I've been wondering how things are going with David's mother," my mother said after we exchanged initial pleasantries. 2 weeks is a long time to have a house guest, especially one who speaks a different language. Her observation provided an opening to share my concerns about Elena's stay and the suggestion Jessica had made about recording private conversations. My mother listened carefully as I described the household tensions, my frustrations with David's changing behavior, and my uncertainty about Elena's actual thoughts and feelings regarding our living arrangement. "Recording someone's private conversations feels wrong to me," my mother said directly after I finished explaining the situation. "But I understand why you're considering it. You feel like you're operating blind in a situation that's affecting your marriage and your peace of mind." Her validation of my conflicted feelings was both comforting and clarifying. She understood that my consideration of ethically questionable behavior reflected desperation rather than malicious intent, while still maintaining clear boundaries about appropriate conduct. "What would you do in my situation?" I asked, genuinely seeking guidance from someone whose judgment I trusted implicitly. "I would have a direct conversation with David about how his mother's stay is affecting our relationship," she replied without hesitation. "And if that conversation didn't lead to meaningful changes, I would have a direct conversation with Elena herself, language barriers notwithstanding." Her suggestion was both obvious and intimidating. Direct communication represented the most ethical and potentially effective approach to addressing our household tensions, but it also carried risks of creating conflict, hurt feelings, or damaged relationships that might be difficult to repair. "What if David doesn't understand why I'm struggling with this situation?" I asked. "What if he thinks I'm being unreasonable or culturally insensitive?" "Then you'll have learned something important about your husband's capacity to understand and support you during difficult situations," my mother replied. "Marriage requires both partners to be able to hear and respond to each other's concerns, even when those concerns might seem unreasonable at first glance." Her observation forced me to confront the possibility that my reluctance to communicate directly with David reflected uncertainty about his ability to receive and respond to my perspective supportively. If I could not trust my husband to listen to my concerns with compassion and understanding, our marriage had more fundamental problems than Elena's temporary presence could create. And if Elena becomes upset when I try to discuss my feelings with her, quote, "then you'll know that she's someone who cannot handle honest communication about interpersonal difficulties," my mother said. "But you might also discover that she's been experiencing her own confusion and frustration about the situation and would welcome an opportunity to address it directly." The conversation with my mother provided a framework for approaching our household tensions through direct communication rather than covert information gathering. However, implementing her suggestions required courage that I was not certain I possessed, and communication skills that might prove inadequate for navigating complex cultural and linguistic barriers. That evening, as Elena began her usual phone conversation with Carmen, I made a decision that surprised me with its sudden clarity. Instead of attempting to record her private communications, I would respect her privacy, while focusing on improving our direct interactions through patience, creativity, and genuine effort to understand her perspective. This decision felt both morally satisfying and practically challenging. Choosing the ethical path often requires accepting uncertainty and ambiguity that less scrupulous approaches might temporarily resolve. I would need to develop tolerance for not knowing Elena's private thoughts while building skills for creating better communication and understanding through respectful, direct interaction. The following morning, I woke with renewed determination to approach our household dynamics differently. Instead of focusing on my frustrations with Elena's presence, I would concentrate on identifying opportunities to connect with her more meaningfully, despite our language and cultural barriers. During breakfast, I made a conscious effort to include Elena in conversation through simple questions about her interests, experiences, and preferences. I asked about her favorite foods, her memories of David's childhood, and her impressions of Portland's weather and scenery. While her responses were brief due to English limitations, they provided glimpses of her personality and perspective that I had not previously discovered. Elena's face brightened when discussing David's academic achievements and the pride she felt watching him become the first college graduate in their family. She spoke with quiet satisfaction about the restaurant work that had funded his education and the sacrifices that had seemed worthwhile when he received his doctorate degree. "I worked many years so David could study," she said, with evident pride. "He is a very smart boy, always reading, always learning. I knew he would do important things." Her words highlighted the profound love and dedication that had shaped David's upbringing and explained the deep bond between mother and son that I had sometimes felt excluded from. Elena's sacrifices had been substantial and purposeful, creating opportunities for David that would have been impossible without her unwavering support and commitment. The conversation also revealed Elena's awareness that her educational and linguistic limitations created barriers to full participation in David's adult life. She expressed appreciation for his success while acknowledging that his professional world remained largely inaccessible to her due to language and cultural differences. "Sometimes I worry I cannot understand his life now," she admitted with touching vulnerability. "His work, his friends, his world is very different from mine." Her confession provided insight into her own feelings of displacement and uncertainty that mirrored some of my own experiences during her stay. Both of us were navigating unfamiliar territory and trying to find our place within family dynamics that felt somewhat foreign and challenging. This recognition created an opportunity for connection based on shared experience, rather than assumed differences. Both Elena and I were women trying to understand our roles within David's life and family structure, both dealing with cultural and communication barriers that sometimes left us feeling isolated or misunderstood. "I think David is lucky to have both of us caring about him," I said carefully, hoping to communicate support and alliance rather than competition or judgment. Elena smiled genuinely for the first time since her arrival, and I realized that my previous assumption about her reserve had been incomplete. Her careful interactions with me might have reflected uncertainty about her welcome in our home, rather than criticism of my character or behavior. The shift in our dynamic was subtle but meaningful. Throughout the day, Elena seemed more relaxed and willing to engage in small conversations about household routines, meal preferences, and daily activities. She began offering observations about Portland's beauty and asking questions about my work and interests that demonstrated genuine curiosity rather than polite obligation. By evening, I felt cautiously optimistic that direct communication and respectful attention to Elena's perspective might be sufficient to address our household tensions without resorting to covert information gathering. The recording equipment remained unused in my bedside drawer, serving as a reminder of the path I had chosen not to take. However, my resolve would be tested the following day when I overheard Elena speaking with unusual emotional intensity during her phone conversation with Carmen. The passion in her voice suggested that she was discussing something more significant than routine family updates or health concerns. creating renewed curiosity about the content of their private communications. The call for help had transformed from Jessica's suggestion about recording conversations into my mother's guidance about direct communication and my own commitment to ethical relationship building. The path forward remained uncertain, but my approach had shifted from seeking hidden information toward creating conditions for open and honest interaction based on mutual respect and understanding. The decision to prioritize direct communication over covert surveillance represented a crucial choice about the kind of person I wanted to be and the kind of relationships I wanted to build with family members. While the outcomes remained uncertain, the process itself was already teaching me valuable lessons about courage, integrity, and the complex work of building bridges across cultural and generational differences. This foundation of ethical decision-making would prove essential when the true nature of Elena's private conversations was eventually revealed through circumstances I could never have anticipated. The unexpected arrival of Dr. Maria Santos at our front door Friday morning transformed what had been a routine day into a pivotal moment in my understanding of family dynamics and cross-cultural relationships. Maria, a family therapist specializing in multicultural counseling, had been Elena's neighbor for 15 years before Elena moved to a smaller apartment following her husband's death 3 years earlier. Maria appeared without advance notice, carrying a large container of homemade tamales and speaking rapid Spanish with Elena, who greeted her with obvious delight and relief. Their animated conversation continued for several minutes before Maria transitioned to English for my benefit, introducing herself with warmth and professional confidence that immediately commanded respect. "I apologize for arriving unannounced," Maria said, her English carrying only traces of accent despite Spanish being her first language. "I heard about Elena's surgery and wanted to check on her recovery progress. I also brought these tamales because I know she has been missing familiar foods during her stay here." Maria's presence provided immediate insight into Elena's social support network and cultural connections that I had not previously considered. Elena's animated response to her unexpected visitor revealed a level of comfort and expressiveness that I had not witnessed during her interactions with David and me, highlighting the extent to which language and cultural barriers had been constraining her authentic personality. During their initial conversation, conducted primarily in Spanish, I observed Elena gesturing toward me several times while speaking with emotional intensity that suggested she was sharing significant concerns or observations. Maria listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions that prompted longer explanations from Elena, creating an impression of therapeutic conversation rather than casual social interaction. "Sarah, would you mind if I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Maria asked after their conversation concluded. "Elena has shared some concerns about her stay here, and I think there might be some misunderstandings that could be addressed through better communication." Her request created both anticipation and anxiety. The professional manner in which Maria approached the conversation suggested that Elena had indeed been experiencing difficulties during her stay with us, confirming my suspicions, while also indicating that resolution might be possible through appropriate intervention. We moved to the kitchen while Elena settled into the living room with her tamales, finally eating food that reflected her cultural preferences and dietary familiarity. The satisfaction evident on Elena's face as she enjoyed Maria's cooking highlighted another dimension of her displacement that I had not adequately considered. "Elena is struggling more than she has been able to communicate to you," Maria began directly. "Not with her physical recovery, which is progressing well, but with feeling like she belongs in your home and understanding her role within your household." Her observation reframed Elena's reserved behavior and household difficulties as expressions of uncertainty rather than criticism or dissatisfaction. The broken dishes, reorganized cabinets, and insistence on domestic tasks might have reflected Elena's attempts to establish purpose and contribute value within an environment where her usual roles and capabilities felt irrelevant or unwelcome. "She is also concerned that her presence is creating stress in your marriage," Maria continued. "Elena has observed tension between you and David that she attributes to her stay here, and she feels responsible for causing problems in your relationship." This revelation completely altered my understanding of Elena's emotional state during her visit. Rather than being oblivious to household tensions, she had been acutely aware of the stress her presence was creating, while feeling powerless to address it due to communication barriers and cultural differences. Elena has spent her entire adult life taking care of other people, Maria explained. Her identity and sense of worth are deeply connected to her ability to nurture and support her family. Being in a position where she needs care rather than providing it feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar to her. The psychological complexity of Elena's situation became clearer through Maria's professional perspective. Elena's recovery period required accepting dependency that conflicted with her lifelong role as caregiver and family stabilizer. Her attempts to maintain domestic contributions despite medical restrictions represented efforts to preserve identity and purpose rather than rejection of my hospitality. "What has Elena told you about her concerns regarding my care for her?" I asked, genuinely wanting to understand her perspective rather than defend my actions. "She appreciates your efforts to make her comfortable, but she feels like you are walking on eggshells around her," Maria replied with gentle directness. "Elena senses that you view her as a burden rather than a welcome family member, and this perception makes her feel guilty about accepting your help." Her assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Despite my conscious efforts to be hospitable and supportive, my underlying stress and frustration had apparently been communicated through subtle behavioral cues that Elena had interpreted as evidence of my reluctance to accommodate her presence. "Elena also feels confused about cultural expectations in your household," Maria continued. "She understands that you and David have different approaches to marriage and domestic responsibilities than what she is familiar with, but she does not know how to navigate these differences appropriately." This insight illuminated another source of tension that I had not previously recognized. Elena's traditional values about gender roles and family hierarchy had been challenged by observing our egalitarian marriage dynamics, creating uncertainty about appropriate behavior and expectations during her stay. "She mentioned that you seem uncomfortable when she tries to help with household tasks," Maria observed. In Elena's cultural framework, refusing to contribute to domestic work while staying in someone's home would be deeply disrespectful, but she senses that her help is not wanted or appreciated. The cultural misunderstanding was profound and mutual. My efforts to ensure Elena rested during her recovery had been interpreted as rejection of her contributions and evidence that I viewed her as incapable or unwelcome. Meanwhile, her insistence on domestic participation had felt to me like criticism of my housekeeping standards and disregard for medical recommendations. "What would Elena prefer in terms of our interactions and household dynamics?" I asked, recognizing that direct communication about expectations and preferences might resolve many of our interpersonal difficulties. "She would like to contribute to meal preparation and household maintenance in ways that do not compromise her physical recovery," Maria replied. "Elena is an excellent cook and takes pride in her culinary skills. She would also appreciate opportunities to share stories about David's childhood and her family experiences." The suggestions provided concrete directions for improving our relationship through activities that honored Elena's capabilities while creating opportunities for meaningful connection. Cooking together could address her need to contribute while allowing cultural exchange that might enhance mutual understanding and appreciation. "Elena is also concerned about David," Maria continued, introducing another dimension of family dynamics that I had not considered. "She observes that he is caught between wanting to honor his mother and wanting to support his wife, and she worries that her presence is forcing him to choose sides in ways that create stress for everyone." This perspective on David's behavior provided insight into his apparent regression to traditional gender roles during Elena's stay. Rather than simply reverting to childhood patterns, he might have been attempting to balance competing expectations from two important women in his life, neither of whom felt fully supported or understood. "What does Elena think would help resolve these tensions?" I asked, hoping that her perspective might provide guidance for improving our household dynamics during the remainder of her stay. "Honest conversation between all three of you about expectations, concerns, and cultural differences," Maria replied without hesitation. "Elena believes that many of the current difficulties stem from assumptions and misunderstandings that could be addressed through direct communication, even if that communication requires translation assistance." Her recommendation aligned with the guidance my mother had provided while offering practical approaches for managing language barriers that had previously seemed insurmountable. Maria's presence provided the cultural and linguistic bridge that could facilitate meaningful dialogue between Elena and me. Would you be willing to help facilitate that conversation? I asked, recognizing that Maria's professional expertise and cultural competence made her uniquely qualified to guide our family through this complex interpersonal terrain. I would be honored to help, Maria replied with genuine warmth. Elena is like family to me, and I can see that you and David genuinely care about her comfort and happiness. With some adjustments in communication and expectations, I believe this situation can become positive for everyone involved. Her confidence in our capacity for improvement provided hope that had been lacking during the previous week of mounting tensions and misunderstandings. Professional guidance offered pathways for growth and connection that individual efforts had not achieved. There is something else Elena wanted me to share with you, Maria said, her tone becoming more serious. She has been having daily phone conversations with Carmen not just to discuss her recovery, but to process her emotions about observing your marriage and household. The revelation created a mixture of vindication and concern. My intuition that Elena's phone conversations contained significant content about our living situation had been accurate, but the focus of those discussions had been Elena's emotional processing rather than criticism of my character or behavior. Elena has told Carmen that she sees genuine love between you and David, but she also observes patterns that remind her of her own marriage difficulties. Maria continued, she is concerned that some of the tensions in your household reflect deeper communication issues that could benefit from attention. This insight suggested that Elena's presence had revealed relationship dynamics that existed independently of her visit, but had been highlighted by the additional stress of accommodating a houseguest with different cultural expectations and communication needs. What specific patterns has Elena observed that concern her? I asked, recognizing that an outside perspective on our marriage might provide valuable insights for improvement. Elena notices that you and David sometimes avoid direct conversation about difficult topics, Maria replied. She sees both of you working hard to accommodate her presence without discussing your actual feelings or concerns with each other. In her experience, this type of conflict avoidance can create larger problems over time. Her observation was remarkably perceptive. David and I had indeed been navigating Elena's stay through parallel adjustment rather than collaborative problem solving, each of us making individual accommodations without ensuring that our approaches were aligned or sustainable. Elena also observes that you both seem to assume you understand each other's perspectives without checking those assumptions through conversation, Maria continued. She has watched this pattern cause misunderstandings in her own family relationships. The feedback highlighted communication patterns that had developed in our marriage during periods of stability but proved inadequate for managing complex interpersonal challenges. Elena's presence had created circumstances that required more sophisticated collaboration and dialogue than our normal routines demanded. Elena's insights about marriage and family relationships are based on decades of experience, Maria explained. She raised 3 children, maintained a marriage through significant financial and cultural stress, and has observed many families navigate similar challenges. Her perspective, while rooted in different cultural values, reflects practical wisdom about human relationships. This reframing of Elena's presence transformed her from a source of household disruption into a potential resource for marriage enrichment and family strengthening. Her observations about our relationship dynamics might provide opportunities for growth that would benefit us long after her recovery period concluded. Would Elena be willing to share her insights about our marriage directly with David and me? I asked, intrigued by the possibility of learning from her relational experience and wisdom. She would be delighted to contribute to your relationship in meaningful ways, Maria replied with evident pleasure. Elena believes that strong marriages require continuous attention, and that outside perspectives can help couples recognize patterns they might not see independently. The conversation with Maria fundamentally shifted my understanding of Elena's presence, from temporary disruption to valuable opportunity for personal and relational growth. Her cultural perspective, life experience, and observational insights represented resources that could enhance our marriage if we approached them with openness and appreciation, rather than defensiveness and resistance. I would like to arrange a conversation between Elena, David, and me, with your help as facilitator, I said, recognizing that professional guidance would be essential for navigating cultural and linguistic barriers while addressing sensitive interpersonal dynamics. I think that would be beneficial for everyone, Maria agreed. Elena wants to contribute positively to your household during her stay, and you and David want to provide care that honors her dignity and preferences. With better communication, these goals can be aligned rather than competing. Her assessment provided hope that the remaining week of Elena's stay could become an opportunity for building stronger family relationships, rather than simply enduring interpersonal tensions until her departure. The mentor had appeared in the form of professional guidance that could facilitate transformation of a challenging situation into meaningful growth experience. The conversation with Maria concluded with arrangements for a family meeting that evening, where cultural differences could be acknowledged and addressed while establishing clearer expectations and communication patterns for the remainder of Elena's stay. The mentor's arrival had provided both insight into the current dynamics and tools for creating positive change that would benefit all parties involved. This professional intervention represented a turning point where conflict could be transformed into connection through understanding, respect, and skilled facilitation of difficult but necessary conversations about family, culture, and the complex work of building bridges across generational and cultural differences. The evening family meeting that Maria had arranged felt like preparing for a performance where I had not been given the script. As David returned from work Friday evening, I found myself questioning whether involving a professional mediator in our household dynamics represented wisdom or an admission of personal failure that would forever alter our family relationships. Maria's insights about Elena's perspective had been enlightening, but they also challenged fundamental assumptions I had made about our living situation and marriage dynamics. The suggestion that Elena possessed valuable wisdom about relationships struck me as potentially patronizing towards someone whose life experiences differed dramatically from contemporary relationship models that David and I had consciously adopted. Elena had lived within traditional gender roles throughout her marriage, accepting primary responsibility for domestic labor and child-rearing, while her husband focused on economic provision. Her relationship advice emerged from cultural frameworks that emphasized hierarchy, sacrifice, and accommodation, rather than the equality, communication, and mutual support that characterized modern partnerships. The prospect of receiving marriage guidance from someone whose relationship experiences seemed outdated or potentially limiting created internal resistance that I struggled to acknowledge directly. This resistance felt uncomfortable because it revealed cultural bias and generational prejudice that conflicted with my conscious values about respecting diverse perspectives and life experiences. David's response to learning about the planned family meeting was notably different from my own anxiety and uncertainty. He expressed genuine enthusiasm about the opportunity to address household tensions through structured conversation, apparently viewing professional facilitation as evidence of our commitment to resolving difficulties rather than indication of relationship inadequacy. "I think this could be really helpful," David said as we prepared dinner together while Elena rested in the living room. "I have been sensing tension between you and Mom, but I have not known how to address it without seeming like I was taking sides or making things worse." His acknowledgement of the interpersonal difficulties validated my experiences, while also revealing his own frustration with feeling caught between competing loyalties and expectations. David's relief about having professional guidance suggested that he had been struggling with our household dynamics more than his apparent obliviousness had indicated. "What do you hope will come out of this conversation?" I asked, genuinely curious about his expectations and concerns regarding the family meeting. "I want Mom to feel welcome and valued during her stay here," David replied. "I also want you to feel comfortable and supported in our own home. Right now, it seems like both of you are making sacrifices that are creating stress rather than solutions." His assessment accurately captured the dynamic where Elena and I had been attempting to accommodate each other through parallel adjustment rather than collaborative problem-solving. Neither of us had felt fully supported or understood, despite both of us making genuine efforts to be considerate and respectful. "I am also curious about what Mom has observed about our marriage," David continued. "Maria mentioned that Mom has insights about our communication patterns that might be helpful for us to hear." David's openness to receiving feedback about our relationship from his mother surprised me with its lack of defensiveness or concern about privacy boundaries. His willingness to accept external perspective on intimate relationship dynamics suggested confidence in our marriage foundation that I was not certain I shared. The prospect of Elena critiquing our marriage felt invasive and potentially destabilizing. Our relationship had developed through careful negotiation of individual needs, professional demands, and personal growth objectives that might not align with traditional relationship models that Elena understood and valued. Elena's perspective on marriage had been shaped by circumstances that required subordinating individual desires to family survival needs. Her relationship advice might emphasize compromise and accommodation in ways that could undermine the autonomy and equality that David and I had worked to establish in our partnership. These concerns reflected deeper questions about the universality of relationship wisdom across cultural and generational boundaries. Could insights from traditional marriage models enhance contemporary partnerships? Or would such advice necessarily conflict with progressive relationship values about gender equality and individual fulfillment? Maria arrived precisely at 7 o'clock, carrying a folder of materials and projecting professional confidence that helped ease my anxiety about the upcoming conversation. Her presence transformed our living room into a therapeutic space where difficult topics could be addressed with appropriate structure and emotional safety. Before we begin, I want to establish some guidelines for our conversation, Maria said as we settled into comfortable seating arrangements. Everyone will have opportunities to share their perspectives without interruption. We will focus on understanding rather than defending. Our goal is to identify ways to improve household dynamics for the remainder of Elena's stay. Her framework provided reassurance that the conversation would remain constructive, rather than devolving into accusations or defensive arguments. Professional facilitation created conditions where sensitive topics could be explored without the emotional reactivity that often characterized family discussions about interpersonal difficulties. Elena began by expressing gratitude for our hospitality, while acknowledging her awareness that her presence had created unexpected challenges for our household routine. She spoke in a mixture of Spanish and English, with Maria providing translation assistance that ensured her full thoughts and feelings could be communicated accurately. Elena wants you to know that she recognizes her stay has been more difficult for everyone than anticipated, Maria translated. She feels responsible for creating stress in your marriage and wishes she could contribute more positively to your household during her recovery period. Elena's acknowledgement of our difficulties felt validating, while also highlighting her emotional burden about causing interpersonal conflict. Her willingness to accept responsibility for household tensions demonstrated maturity and concern for our well-being that contradicted my assumptions about her awareness of our situation. Elena also wants to share some observations about your marriage that she hopes might be helpful, Maria continued. She has watched many couples navigate challenges throughout her life, and she believes that some of the patterns she has observed could benefit from attention. The transition to marriage feedback created immediate tension in my body. Elena's observations about our relationship would necessarily be filtered through cultural frameworks that might not align with our relationship values, potentially creating conflict rather than resolution. Elena spoke for several minutes in Spanish, with Maria taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. The conversation appeared earnest and thoughtful, suggesting that Elena had indeed been processing significant observations about our marriage dynamics, rather than simply enduring her stay without reflection. Elena has noticed that you and David work very hard to avoid disappointing each other, Maria translated. She sees both of you making assumptions about what the other person wants or needs, without checking those assumptions through direct conversation. Her observation was uncomfortably accurate. David and I had indeed been navigating Elena's stay through individual accommodation, rather than collaborative planning, each of us trying to anticipate the other's preferences without ensuring that our efforts were aligned or effective. Elena also observes that you both seem reluctant to express concerns or dissatisfaction directly, Maria continued. She has watched this pattern in her own family relationships, and she believes it can create misunderstandings that grow larger over time if not addressed. The feedback highlighted communication patterns that had served our marriage well during periods of stability, but proved inadequate for managing complex interpersonal challenges. Elena's perspective provided insight into potential relationship vulnerabilities that we might not have recognized without external observation. What specific examples has Elena noticed that illustrate these patterns? I asked, hoping that concrete instances might help me understand her assessment more clearly, while also testing whether her observations were based on accurate interpretation of our interactions. Elena responded through Maria with specific incidents from the past week, where she had observed David and me making parallel decisions without consultation or coordination. She had noticed us individually adjusting our behavior to accommodate her presence without discussing our strategies or ensuring that our approaches were complementary. Elena watched Sarah reorganize the kitchen schedule to provide more family meal times, while David adjusted his work schedule to spend more time at home. Maria translated. Both changes were thoughtful, but neither of you discussed these adjustments with each other to ensure they were sustainable or aligned with your actual preferences. The example illustrated Elena's perceptive observation skills and her understanding of relationship dynamics that extended beyond cultural differences. Her feedback reflected sophisticated awareness of how couples can work at cross purposes, despite shared intentions when communication remains implicit rather than explicit. Elena has also noticed that both of you seem to assume that good relationships require minimal conflict or disagreement, Maria continued. She believes this assumption can prevent couples from addressing small problems before they become larger issues. This insight challenged fundamental beliefs I held about relationship health and compatibility. David and I had prided ourselves on our harmonious partnership and relative absence of significant conflict, viewing these characteristics as evidence of successful relationship building rather than potential warning signs about communication avoidance. Elena's feedback suggested that our conflict avoidance might reflect relationship immaturity rather than relationship strength. Her perspective, based on decades of marriage experience, proposed that healthy relationships required skills for navigating disagreement constructively rather than strategies for preventing disagreement entirely. What does Elena suggest we do differently to address these communication patterns? David asked, his tone reflecting genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness about receiving relationship advice from his mother. Elena's response, translated through Maria, provided specific recommendations for improving our communication and decision-making processes. She suggested establishing regular check-in conversations where we could share concerns and preferences directly, rather than relying on assumptions and individual adjustments. She also recommended developing comfort with temporary disagreement as part of working toward solutions that satisfied both partners, rather than avoiding topics that might create initial conflict. Elena's advice emphasized that relationship strength came from successfully navigating differences rather than from avoiding situations where differences might emerge. Elena believes that strong marriages require continuous attention and that couples benefit from outside perspectives that can help them recognize patterns they might not see independently, Maria translated. She offers her insights not as criticism but as gifts based on her life experience and her care for your relationship success. Elena's framing of her feedback as gifts rather than corrections helped reduce my resistance to receiving advice from someone whose relationship experiences differed from my own. Her motivation appeared to be genuine investment in our marriage success rather than desire to impose traditional relationship models on our contemporary partnership. The conversation continued with Elena sharing specific observations about moments when David and I had demonstrated strong communication and mutual support, providing balanced feedback that recognized our relationship strengths while identifying areas for potential improvement. Elena has been impressed by the respect you show each other and the way you both prioritize each other's professional success, Maria translated. She sees genuine love and partnership in your marriage. Her suggestions are meant to strengthen what is already working well, rather than to change your fundamental approach to your relationship. This reassurance helped contextualize Elena's feedback as enhancement rather than criticism of our marriage foundation. Her observations reflected supplementary wisdom rather than corrective intervention, making her insights feel more accessible and less threatening to our relationship autonomy. As the formal feedback session concluded, I found myself surprised by the practical value of Elena's observations and recommendations. Her insights were based on careful attention to our actual interactions, rather than theoretical frameworks, making her advice relevant despite cultural and generational differences in relationship models. The resistance I had felt toward receiving marriage guidance from David's mother began dissolving as I recognized that relationship wisdom could transcend specific cultural contexts when it was based on fundamental human dynamics rather than prescribed role expectations. Elena's willingness to share her observations reflected investment in our relationship success that honored our autonomy while offering resources from her life experience. Her approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how to provide guidance, without imposing values or expectations that might conflict with our chosen relationship style. The family meeting concluded with commitments from all parties to implement improved communication practices for the remainder of Elena's stay. These included daily check-in conversations between David and me about household adjustments, more direct expression of preferences and concerns, and regular opportunities for Elena to contribute her domestic skills in ways that honored her capabilities while supporting her recovery. The transition from resistance to acceptance of Elena's guidance represented a crucial shift in my willingness to learn from sources that initially seemed incompatible with my worldview. The discovery that wisdom could emerge from unexpected places would prove essential preparation for the deeper revelations that were soon to unfold about Elena's true motivations and the profound sacrifices she had been making on behalf of our family. The first test of our newly established communication protocols arrived Saturday morning when David announced that his colleague Marcus Henderson would be visiting for a business dinner Monday evening. This dinner represented a crucial opportunity for David to secure funding for an environmental consulting project that could significantly advance his career, making the success of the evening professionally important beyond normal social hospitality. Under ordinary circumstances, hosting a business dinner would have required careful coordination between David and me regarding meal planning, house preparation, and conversation strategies. However, Elena's presence added complexity that our previous hosting experiences had not required us to navigate. Elena's limited English would prevent her from participating fully in dinner conversation, potentially creating awkward social dynamics. Her traditional expectations about hostess responsibilities might conflict with my professional obligations and hosting preferences. Most significantly, this situation would test whether the communication improvements we had committed to implementing could actually function under stress. The announcement of Marcus's visit triggered immediate anxiety about how to manage multiple competing expectations and needs simultaneously. David needed professional success. Elena deserved inclusion and respect. Marcus required appropriate hospitality, and I needed to maintain my own sense of competence and comfort within our home environment. My initial impulse was to suggest that Elena might prefer to have dinner in her room or visit with Maria during Marcus's visit, thereby simplifying the social dynamics while ensuring that business conversations could proceed without translation difficulties or cultural complications. This approach would have prioritized professional objectives while avoiding potential interpersonal challenges. However, Elena's recent feedback about our tendency to make parallel decisions without consultation reminded me that implementing our improved communication practices required discussing the situation directly, rather than making unilateral accommodation decisions that might not serve everyone's actual interests. "Elena, David has a colleague coming for dinner Monday night," I said during breakfast Saturday morning, speaking slowly and clearly to accommodate her English comprehension while including her in our planning process. "This is an important business meeting for David. We would like your thoughts about how to handle this situation." Elena's face brightened with interest rather than concern, suggesting that inclusion in planning decisions felt more comfortable to her than exclusion from potentially problematic social situations. She asked several questions about Marcus's background, the nature of David's project, and the professional significance of the dinner meeting. "I can cook," Elena offered enthusiastically. "Mexican food. Very good for business dinner. People remember good food. Helps with business success." Her suggestion created immediate internal conflict. Elena's cooking skills were undoubtedly superior to my own, and authentic Mexican cuisine would certainly provide memorable hospitality that could enhance the professional impression David wanted to create. However, accepting Elena's offer might position her as domestic help rather than family member, potentially reinforcing traditional gender dynamics that I preferred to avoid. The complexity of navigating cultural expectations, professional needs, and personal values within a single social situation highlighted why our previous approach of parallel accommodation had felt simpler than collaborative decision-making. Including everyone's perspectives required managing multiple competing priorities that individual adjustment could have avoided. That is a generous offer, I replied carefully. How do you think we should structure the evening so that you feel included and comfortable, while also ensuring that David's business conversation can be productive? Elena's response revealed sophisticated thinking about social dynamics and intercultural hospitality. She suggested preparing a special meal that would demonstrate cultural richness while planning her participation in ways that honored both business requirements and family inclusion. I cook an afternoon, we eat together, then I give David and friend privacy for business talk, Elena proposed. This way, friend experiences Mexican hospitality, but business conversation happens without language problems. Her solution addressed multiple concerns simultaneously while demonstrating strategic thinking about how to balance competing needs through careful timing and role definition. Elena's approach reflected practical wisdom about hosting that emerged from decades of creating welcoming environments within resource constraints. David's response to Elena's proposal was immediately positive, expressing genuine appreciation for her willingness to contribute her skills to his professional advancement. His enthusiasm created pressure for me to support the plan, even though concerns remained about whether accepting Elena's domestic labor represented appropriate family dynamics. I think that sounds wonderful, David said with obvious relief. Marcus loves trying different cuisines, and having authentic Mexican food would definitely make this dinner memorable in positive ways. The situation required me to examine whether my hesitation about Elena's cooking offer reflected legitimate concerns about exploitation or whether it represented cultural bias about the value and dignity of domestic contributions. Elena's obvious pleasure in offering her culinary skills suggested that cooking for David's colleague would bring her satisfaction rather than burden. The challenge demanded that I distinguish between protecting Elena from exploitation and respecting her autonomous choices about how to contribute to family success. Elena's traditional values attributed dignity and importance to domestic excellence, and rejecting her offer might communicate disrespect for her capabilities rather than concern for her comfort. I would appreciate your help with cooking, I said after internal deliberation. However, I want to ensure that you do not feel obligated to take responsibility for the entire meal preparation. We should work together so that hosting remains a shared responsibility. Elena's smile indicated that collaborative cooking felt more appealing than either complete responsibility or complete exclusion from meal preparation. The compromise honored her desire to contribute while maintaining principles about shared domestic labor that aligned with my values about household equity. The remainder of Saturday was spent planning Monday's dinner through the type of detailed collaborative conversation that Elena had recommended for improving our marriage communication. David, Elena, and I discussed menu options, timing considerations, and social dynamics with careful attention to everyone's preferences and concerns. This planning process revealed capabilities for collaboration that our previous parallel adjustment approach had not accessed. Elena's cultural knowledge about impressive hospitality complemented David's understanding of Marcus's professional interests and my experience with dinner party logistics, creating comprehensive preparation that none of us could have achieved independently. Elena's suggestions about presentation and timing reflected sophisticated understanding of how food and atmosphere contribute to business relationship building. Her insights extended beyond cooking techniques to include strategic thinking about how hospitality could enhance David's professional objectives. Important business needs good setting, Elena explained in her careful English. Food, presentation, comfortable feeling helps people want to work together. I have seen this many times in restaurants where I worked. Her professional experience in commercial food service provided expertise that David and I lacked about creating memorable dining experiences that supported business objectives. Elena's perspective transformed meal planning from domestic obligation into strategic professional preparation. Sunday morning brought unexpected complications when David received a phone call from Marcus requesting to bring his business partner Claire Patterson to Monday's dinner. This addition doubled the professional stakes, while also changing the social dynamics from individual relationship building to group impression management. The news triggered immediate stress about whether our carefully planned approach could accommodate additional complexity without compromising the quality of hospitality or the effectiveness of business relationship building. Elena's meal planning had been calibrated for 3 people, and her social preparation had assumed individual rather than group professional dynamics. My first impulse was to suggest postponing the dinner until we could prepare more adequately for expanded hosting requirements. This response reflected anxiety about managing increased complexity, rather than confidence in our collaborative problem-solving capabilities. However, David's excitement about Claire's attendance reminded me that professional opportunities often require adapting to changing circumstances rather than controlling conditions to match predetermined preferences. The situation provided immediate opportunity to test whether our improved communication practices could function under genuine pressure. "Elena, Marcus is bringing his business partner Claire to dinner," I announced, watching her face for signs of concern or overwhelm. "This means 4 people instead of 3, and both Marcus and Claire will be evaluating David's professionalism. How do you think we should adjust our plans?" Elena's response demonstrated remarkable adaptability and strategic thinking. Rather than expressing concern about increased complexity, she immediately began calculating adjustments to menu quantities and presentation style that would accommodate expanded requirements without compromising quality. "More people is better for business," Elena observed with satisfaction. "Shows David has important friends, good connections. I cook more food, we arrange table differently, everything will be very impressive." Her confidence in managing expanded hosting requirements provided reassurance that accepting Elena's culinary leadership represented wisdom, rather than abdication of hostess responsibilities. Elena's professional experience with variable service demands had prepared her for exactly this type of adaptive challenge. The planning conversation that followed revealed sophisticated coordination capabilities that emerged when family members contributed their respective expertise toward shared objectives. Elena managed food preparation logistics, David handled professional relationship considerations, and I coordinated household presentation and social facilitation. This collaborative approach produced preparation strategies that were both more comprehensive and more efficient than individual planning would have achieved. Each family member's contributions enhanced the others' effectiveness, creating synergy that justified the additional coordination effort required for shared decision-making. Monday morning arrived with carefully orchestrated preparation activities that required precise timing and coordination between all household members. Elena began food preparation early in the day, working steadily to create an impressive meal that would demonstrate both cultural authenticity and sophisticated presentation. David spent the morning reviewing business materials and preparing conversation strategies that would engage both Marcus and Claire while advancing his project funding objectives. His preparation included researching Claire's professional background and identifying topics that would create productive dialogue between all dinner participants. My role involved coordinating household presentation, managing timing logistics, and ensuring that social dynamics would flow smoothly between family hospitality and business relationship building. This coordination required constant communication with both David and Elena about timing, preferences, and contingency planning. The intensity of preparation revealed how much collaborative effort was required to execute hospitality that honored everyone's needs and objectives simultaneously. Our previous approach of parallel accommodation would have been inadequate for managing this level of complexity while maintaining quality standards across multiple performance dimensions. Elena's cooking filled our house with extraordinary aromas that created anticipation and appetite long before the guests arrived. Her attention to presentation details transformed our dining room into a restaurant-quality environment that elevated the entire social atmosphere. "Everything smells incredible," David said during afternoon preparation, his appreciation for Elena's contributions evident in both his words and his relaxed demeanor. "I feel confident that this dinner will make exactly the impression I want to create with Marcus and Claire." Elena's pleasure in David's satisfaction was obvious, and I realized that her cooking contribution represented love and family support rather than domestic obligation. Her efforts were motivated by investment in David's success rather than compliance with traditional gender expectations. The evening began with Marcus and Claire arriving precisely on time, both of them immediately commenting on the wonderful aromas and elegant table presentation that Elena had created. Their positive first impressions validated Elena's strategic thinking about how exceptional hospitality could enhance business relationship building. Elena's interaction with the guests was gracious and confident despite language limitations. She welcomed Marcus and Claire warmly, explained the cultural significance of the dishes she had prepared, and then gracefully transitioned to the kitchen to complete final meal preparations. The dinner conversation flowed naturally between cultural appreciation, business discussion, and family interaction in ways that honored both professional objectives and family inclusion. Elena's contributions to the evening extended beyond cooking to include cultural education that enriched the social experience for all participants. Marcus and Claire's genuine enthusiasm for the meal and hospitality created positive energy that enhanced their receptiveness to David's business proposals. Elena's prediction that exceptional food would support professional relationship building proved accurate in ways that validated her strategic insights about hospitality and business success. The evening concluded with commitments from Marcus and Claire to advance David's project funding through their professional networks. The business success exceeded David's expectations and demonstrated the value of Elena's contributions to achieving professional objectives through cultural hospitality excellence. The first challenge had tested our ability to implement improved communication and collaboration practices under genuine pressure. The successful outcome validated Elena's wisdom about family cooperation and demonstrated that inclusive decision-making could produce superior results compared to individual accommodation approaches. This experience established foundation for the deeper collaboration and mutual respect that would be essential when the full truth about Elena's sacrifices and motivations was eventually revealed through circumstances that none of us could have anticipated. The success of Monday evening's business dinner created a false sense that our family communication challenges had been resolved through collaborative planning and mutual respect. However, Tuesday morning brought revelations that exposed deeper obstacles operating beneath the surface improvements we had celebrated. Elena's behavior throughout Tuesday seemed subdued despite the previous evening's triumph. She moved through household routines with mechanical efficiency that contrasted sharply with the energy and satisfaction she had displayed while contributing to David's professional success. When I complimented her exceptional cooking and hospitality, Elena responded with polite acknowledgement rather than the pride I had expected. The shift in Elena's demeanor suggested that our collaborative success had triggered emotional responses that were not immediately apparent during the celebratory aftermath of the dinner party. Something about the evening's dynamics or outcomes had created concerns that Elena was processing privately, rather than sharing through our newly established communication practices. David departed for work Tuesday morning without noticing Elena's changed emotional state, his attention absorbed by follow-up communications with Marcus and Claire about project funding opportunities. His professional excitement prevented him from recognizing that Elena's contribution to his success might have generated complicated feelings about her role within our household and family structure. The pattern reflected Elena's earlier observation about David's tendency to focus intensely on immediate priorities, while missing subtle interpersonal dynamics that required ongoing attention and response. Elena's mood shift represented exactly the type of situation where our improved communication practices needed to be applied proactively rather than reactively. I decided to address Elena's apparent emotional withdrawal directly, rather than waiting for problems to escalate or hoping that her mood would improve naturally. This approach represented implementation of Elena's advice about confronting small relationship difficulties before they developed into larger issues requiring more difficult resolution. "Elena, you seem quieter today than yesterday," I observed during our morning coffee. "Are you feeling physically well, or is something else concerning you about our household situation?" Elena's response revealed the complex emotional terrain that lay beneath our recent communication improvements. She expressed appreciation for being included in David's professional success, while also sharing concerns about whether her contributions had been appropriate or potentially problematic for our marriage dynamics. "I worry that I took too much space in your home," Elena said slowly, her limited English requiring careful consideration of each word. "Yesterday was David's important evening, but I became too much the center with my cooking and talking to guests." Her concern illuminated cultural anxiety about appropriate boundaries between generations and genders within family structures. Elena's traditional background had taught her that supporting adult children required careful balance between helpful contribution and intrusive overstepping that could undermine marriage autonomy. The revelation that Elena had been questioning whether her contributions were appropriate demonstrated sophisticated awareness of family dynamics that I had not previously recognized. Her withdrawal reflected concern for our marriage health rather than dissatisfaction with her treatment or role within our household. "Elena, your contributions to David's dinner were perfect," I assured her. "You helped create an evening that advanced his career while honoring our family's cultural richness." Marcus and Claire were genuinely impressed by both the food and the hospitality you provided. Elena's smile acknowledged my reassurance, while her continued expression of concern suggested that deeper issues remained unaddressed. Her worry about overstepping boundaries reflected broader anxiety about her long-term role within David's adult life and marriage that extended beyond the specific circumstances of her recovery stay. "I think sometimes I forget that David has new family now," Elena continued. "You are his first priority, and I must learn to be mother-in-law, not just mother. This is difficult change for me to understand completely." Her admission revealed the profound identity adjustment that Elena was navigating, as David's primary family loyalty shifted from his birth family to his marriage relationship. The psychological complexity of this transition had been operating beneath our household dynamics throughout her stay, influencing her behavior in ways that neither David nor I had recognized. Elena's struggle represented a universal challenge for parents whose adult children establish independent families that require different relationship structures than those that had characterized earlier developmental periods. The transition from primary caregiver to supporting family member required emotional and psychological adjustments that could be particularly complex across cultural and generational boundaries. "Elena, you will always be David's mother, and that relationship is precious and irreplaceable," I said, hoping to address her identity concerns while also acknowledging the reality of changed family dynamics. At the same time, David and I have built a marriage partnership that requires primary loyalty between spouses. Both relationships can be strong and important without competing with each other. Elena's response indicated that intellectual understanding of family role transitions differed significantly from emotional acceptance of changed relationship dynamics. Her years of sacrifice for David's success had created deep emotional investment in his life that made stepping into a supporting rather than central role psychologically challenging. "I know this in my mind," Elena said with evident sadness, "but my heart still wants to take care of David like when he was young and needed me for everything. I must learn to love him differently now." The conversation revealed that Elena's apparent accommodation to our household routines had masked significant emotional work she was performing to adjust her maternal instincts to respect David's adult autonomy and marriage priorities. Her careful behavior had reflected internal struggle rather than natural comfort with our family dynamics. This discovery reframed Elena's broken dishes, reorganized cabinets, and insistence on domestic contribution as expressions of psychological discomfort with changed family roles, rather than criticism of my housekeeping or cultural conflict about gender responsibilities. Elena had been searching for appropriate ways to express maternal care within constraints that felt unfamiliar and emotionally challenging. "Elena, learning to love family members differently as relationships change is one of the most difficult aspects of family life," I acknowledged. "David is lucky to have a mother who cares enough about his happiness to examine her own behavior and make adjustments that support his marriage." Elena's emotional response to my recognition of her sacrifice was immediate and profound. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke about the loneliness of watching David build a life that was separate from, and sometimes inaccessible to her due to cultural, linguistic, and generational differences. "Sometimes I feel like I am losing my son even though he is right here," Elena admitted through her tears. "His life now is so different from the world where I raised him. I want to be part of his success, but I do not always know how to fit into his new world." Her confession exposed the cultural isolation that Elena had been experiencing throughout David's educational and professional advancement. Each of David's achievements had simultaneously represented fulfillment of her sacrifices and evidence of the growing distance between their daily experiences and cultural frameworks. Elena's success in enabling David's assimilation into professional American culture had required accepting that his life would necessarily become less accessible to her due to language barriers, cultural differences, and social class mobility that created different lifestyle expectations and social connections. "Elena, David's success reflects your love and sacrifice, but that does not mean you must become invisible in his adult life," I said, recognizing that Elena's cultural background might have taught her that supporting adult children required self-effacement rather than ongoing relationship building. The conversation continued with Elena sharing additional concerns about her long-term relationship with David that extended beyond her temporary stay in our home. She worried that his marriage, career demands, and cultural assimilation would gradually reduce their contact and emotional connection to polite but distant interactions that honored her role without including her meaningfully in his ongoing life. Elena's fears were based on observations of other immigrant families, where generational and cultural transitions had created permanent emotional distance between parents and adult children, despite continued respect and financial support. She had watched cultural assimilation gradually erode family bonds that could not bridge linguistic and cultural barriers. "I see other families where children become American and mothers become lonely," Elena explained. "I do not want this to happen with David, but I also do not want to prevent him from having the life his education prepared him for." Her concern reflected sophisticated understanding of the potential costs of successful assimilation that mainstream culture rarely acknowledged or addressed. Elena's sacrifices had enabled David's success while potentially creating conditions that could isolate her from meaningful participation in the life she had made possible. The revelation of Elena's deeper anxieties about family continuity and cultural connection created opportunity for addressing concerns that had been operating beneath our household tensions throughout her stay. Elena's apparent difficulty adjusting to our routines had actually reflected broader psychological struggles about her evolving role within David's life. "Elena, David's love for you is not dependent on cultural similarity or language compatibility," I assured her. "Your relationship can grow and change while remaining strong and meaningful. However, maintaining close family bonds across cultural differences requires intentional effort from all family members." Elena's response indicated interest in exploring strategies for building sustainable family relationships that honored cultural differences while maintaining emotional connection. She expressed willingness to learn new approaches to family interaction that could support David's continued success, while ensuring her ongoing meaningful participation in his life. "I want to learn how to be good mother-in-law," Elena said with renewed determination. "I want to support David's marriage and help his family succeed. But I also want to remain an important person in his life, not just memory from his childhood." Her commitment to learning new family roles demonstrated remarkable psychological flexibility and emotional maturity. Elena's willingness to examine her own behavior and adapt to changed circumstances reflected strength and wisdom rather than weakness or cultural inadequacy. The conversation concluded with plans for Elena to discuss her long-term concerns directly with David, rather than continuing to process these anxieties privately through phone conversations with Carmen. Elena agreed that David needed to understand her emotional challenges in order to participate in developing solutions that would support both his marriage and his relationship with his mother. "David should know that his success creates some sadness for me, not because I am not proud, but because I worry about losing connection with him," Elena said. "Maybe if he understands my feelings, we can find ways to stay close that do not interfere with his marriage." Elena's willingness to share vulnerable feelings with David represented significant trust in his emotional maturity and capacity to respond supportively to her concerns. Her decision also demonstrated commitment to direct communication practices that we had been developing throughout her stay. That evening, Elena requested a private conversation with David to share her concerns about their changing relationship and her anxiety about maintaining meaningful connection as his life continued evolving through marriage and career advancement. David's response to his mother's emotional vulnerability would test his ability to balance marriage loyalty with filial responsibility. "Mom, I had no idea you were worried about these things," David said with obvious concern after Elena shared her feelings about cultural isolation and family role transitions. "I never want my success to create distance between us. You are still the most important woman in my life besides Sarah." Quote. David's immediate reassurance demonstrated emotional intelligence and cultural sensitivity that helped address Elena's fears while also acknowledging appropriate marriage priorities. His response indicated that maintaining close relationships with both his mother and his wife represented complementary rather than competing commitments. Elena's relief at David's supportive response was evident in her changed demeanor throughout the remainder of the evening. The opportunity to share her concerns directly rather than processing them privately had provided emotional release while also creating foundation for ongoing dialogue about family relationship maintenance across cultural and generational differences. The revelation of Elena's hidden obstacles had exposed complex emotional terrain that required ongoing attention and care rather than simple communication improvements. Elena's psychological challenges reflected universal family development issues that became more complex when cultural assimilation and social mobility created additional barriers to relationship continuity. However, the willingness of all family members to address these deeper challenges directly rather than avoiding difficult conversations had created opportunity for building stronger and more authentic relationships that could honor both individual growth and family connection. The obstacles, once revealed, became opportunities for deeper understanding and more intentional relationship building that would serve our family well beyond Elena's recovery period. This foundation of honest communication about complex family dynamics would prove essential when the most profound revelations about Elena's sacrifices and motivations were discovered through circumstances that would challenge everything we thought we understood about her presence in our home. Wednesday morning brought unexpected clarity to our household dynamics as Elena emerged from her vulnerable conversation with David with renewed energy and purpose. The emotional release of sharing her deepest concerns about family relationships had eliminated the subdued behavior that had characterized her previous day, replacing it with focused determination to build sustainable connections that could withstand the complexities of cultural and generational differences. Elena's transformation was evident in her approach to daily activities, which shifted from careful accommodation to confident participation. She began initiating conversations about household routines, offering suggestions for improving efficiency, and sharing cultural knowledge that enhanced our family's appreciation for Mexican traditions and values. The change represented more than improved mood. Elena had moved from defensive positioning focused on avoiding interference with our marriage to proactive engagement aimed at contributing value that strengthened our family relationships while respecting appropriate boundaries. David's supportive response to his mother's emotional vulnerability had created foundation for ongoing dialogue about maintaining close family relationships across cultural differences. His commitment to regular communication that honored both his marriage and his filial responsibilities had addressed Elena's primary anxiety about gradual relationship erosion through benign neglect. The morning conversation between Elena and myself revealed her desire to establish independent relationship with me that was not mediated through David's translation or interpretation. Elena recognized that building sustainable family dynamics required direct connection between the women in David's life, rather than parallel relationships that existed primarily in relation to their shared care for him. "Sarah, I want to learn better English so we can talk more easily," Elena announced during breakfast preparation. David should not always be translator between his mother and his wife. This creates difficulty for him and prevents us from knowing each other completely. Her initiative demonstrated sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and communication patterns that could create emotional burden for David while limiting relationship development between Elena and myself. Elena's commitment to language learning represented investment in long-term family harmony rather than temporary accommodation during her recovery period. "I would be happy to help you practice English conversation," I replied, recognizing that language learning represented practical foundation for building the authentic relationship that Elena desired. We could establish regular conversation time where we focus on vocabulary and communication that interests you most. Elena's enthusiasm for structured English learning surprised me with its intensity and focus. She requested immediate assistance with identifying online resources, practice materials, and conversation topics that would accelerate her language acquisition while providing culturally relevant content that connected to her experiences and interests. The language learning project created natural framework for daily interaction that moved beyond polite accommodation toward genuine knowledge sharing and cultural exchange. Elena's questions about English vocabulary led to discussions about American cultural practices, while my interest in Mexican traditions created opportunities for Elena to share expertise about food, family customs, and cultural values that enriched my understanding of David's background. These conversations revealed Elena's remarkable intelligence and adaptability. qualities that had been obscured by language barriers that created false impressions about her intellectual capabilities and cultural sophistication. Elena's insights about American society were perceptive and nuanced, based on decades of observation and experience that provided valuable perspective for someone born within American culture. In Mexico, families stay together through many generations. Elena explained during one of our English practice sessions. Children care for parents. Parents help with grandchildren. Everyone supports each other through difficult times. In America, independence is more important than family connection. Both ways have advantages, but both ways also create problems. Her analysis of cultural differences demonstrated sophisticated thinking about social structures and their psychological implications. Elena's observations about American individualism versus Mexican collectivism provided framework for understanding the challenges she faced adapting to family dynamics that prioritized marriage autonomy over extended family integration. The conversation also revealed Elena's strategic thinking about how to navigate cultural differences while building relationships that honored both value systems. She expressed interest in learning American approaches to family independence while maintaining Mexican traditions of mutual support and intergenerational connection. I want to understand how American families show love and support without interfering with independence, Elena said thoughtfully. Maybe there are ways to combine the best of both cultures in our family relationships. Her approach demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence and cultural flexibility. Rather than insisting on traditional Mexican family patterns or completely adopting American individualistic models, Elena was seeking synthesis that could honor both cultural frameworks while serving contemporary family needs. The English learning sessions also provided opportunities for Elena to share stories about her life experiences that deepened my appreciation for her resilience, intelligence, and the magnitude of sacrifices she had made to support David's education and success. Elena's narrative revealed complex decision-making processes that had required balancing immediate family survival needs with long-term investment in David's potential. When David was 15, I had opportunity to take better job in different city, Elena shared during one conversation. Job paid more money, but David would have to change schools during important time for his education. I decided to stay in same place with less money, so David could continue with teachers who understood his intelligence and could help him succeed. The story illustrated Elena's sophisticated thinking about educational investment and her willingness to sacrifice immediate financial improvement for David's long-term opportunities. Elena's decisions throughout David's adolescence had consistently prioritized his academic development over family economic stability, demonstrating remarkable faith in education as pathway to social mobility. Elena's stories also revealed the emotional costs of her sacrifices, including social isolation that resulted from working multiple jobs that left little time for friendship or community involvement. Elena's entire adult life had been structured around supporting David's success, creating identity and purpose that were deeply connected to his achievements, while potentially limiting her own personal development and fulfillment. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had made different choices, Elena admitted with thoughtful sadness. Maybe I would have learned English sooner. Maybe I would have friends my own age. Maybe I would have interests beyond taking care of family. But then David might not have had opportunities that changed his life completely. Her reflection revealed ongoing psychological processing about the relationship between personal sacrifice and family success. Kandikafalnes, Ezoli. Elena continued to evaluate whether her choices had been optimal, while simultaneously experiencing pride in David's achievements that validated the meaning and purpose of her sacrifices. The conversation created opportunity for me to express appreciation for Elena's contributions to David's success, while also encouraging her to consider developing personal interests and relationships that could provide fulfillment independent of family caretaking responsibilities. Elena, your sacrifices enabled David's success, but that success also creates freedom for you to pursue interests and relationships that bring you personal satisfaction, I suggested. David's achievements mean that you no longer need to focus all your energy on supporting his development. You can now invest time and attention in activities that serve your own growth and happiness. Elena's response indicated that transitioning from family-focused identity to more individualistic self-development represented significant psychological adjustment that required time and support to accomplish successfully. Her entire adult life had been structured around caregiving responsibilities that provided clear purpose and meaning. making personal pursuits feel unfamiliar and potentially selfish. "I do not know what interests me besides family," Elena admitted with vulnerable honesty. "My life has always been about taking care of other people. I am not sure who I am when I am not needed for cooking, cleaning, or helping with problems." Her confession revealed the identity challenges that many women face when family responsibilities diminish and personal development becomes possible but psychologically challenging. Elena's situation reflected broader issues about women's identity formation when primary roles shift from caretaking to self-actualization. The conversation led to exploration of Elena's interests, talents, and curiosities that had been suppressed or ignored during decades of family-focused living. Elena expressed interest in gardening, cooking education, community volunteer work, and cultural preservation activities that could provide meaningful engagement while utilizing her existing skills and knowledge. "I would like to teach other people about Mexican cooking and culture," Elena said with growing excitement. "Maybe I could work with community center or church to share knowledge about traditional foods and customs. This would help me stay connected to my culture while also making new friends." Her idea demonstrated creative thinking about how to transform family caretaking skills into community contribution that could provide social connection and personal fulfillment. Elena's cultural knowledge and cooking expertise represented valuable resources that could benefit broader community while creating opportunities for relationship building and personal growth. The discussion also revealed Elena's interest in supporting other immigrant families who were navigating cultural adaptation challenges similar to those she had experienced throughout David's childhood and adolescence. Elena's experience with educational system navigation, language barriers, and cultural integration provided expertise that could assist other families facing similar transitions. "Many mothers need help understanding how American schools work and how to support children's education without speaking perfect English," Elena observed. "I learned these things through many mistakes and difficulties. Maybe I can help other families learn more easily." Her insight about immigrant family support needs demonstrated awareness of community service opportunities that could utilize her life experience while providing meaningful work that honored her values about family support and education advocacy. Elena's potential community involvement could create social connections while contributing to causes that reflected her personal values and experiences. Thursday morning brought news that Elena's doctor had cleared her for return to normal activities, indicating that her surgical recovery was complete, and her stay with us would conclude within the next few days. The medical clearance created mixed emotions for all family members, as Elena's departure would end our intensive family bonding period while also returning our household to pre-visit dynamics. Elena's response to the medical clearance was notably different from what I had expected during the early days of her stay. Rather than expressing relief about returning to her independent living situation, Elena seemed genuinely sad about concluding our family time together, and concerned about maintaining the relationships we had built during her recovery period. "I do not want to lose the closeness we have found during these weeks," Elena said during our morning conversation. "This time has been difficult sometimes, but it has also been precious for learning about each other and building real family connection." Her sentiment reflected the transformation that had occurred in our family relationships through addressing communication challenges directly rather than avoiding interpersonal difficulties. Elena's presence had initially created stress, but working through those challenges had ultimately strengthened family bonds and created deeper understanding between all parties. The prospect of Elena's departure created opportunity to establish ongoing relationship patterns that could maintain close family connection while respecting marriage autonomy and individual privacy needs. Elena's language learning commitment and our established communication practices provided foundation for sustained relationship building that could continue beyond her physical presence in our home. "Elena, the relationships we have built during your stay do not need to end when you return to your own home," I assured her. "We can continue our English practice conversations, family dinners, and collaborative projects that keep us connected while also maintaining healthy independence." Elena's relief at my commitment to ongoing relationship was evident in her immediate brightening and renewed energy for planning future family interactions. Her investment in building sustainable family patterns demonstrated that her temporary stay had created lasting changes in family dynamics that would continue benefiting all members long after her departure. The final days of Elena's stay would provide opportunities to consolidate the relationship improvements we had achieved, while establishing sustainable patterns for ongoing family connection that honored both cultural values and contemporary marriage expectations. The bridges we had built through honest communication and mutual respect had created foundation for family relationships that could withstand geographical distance and cultural differences, while continuing to provide support and enrichment for all family members. This foundation of authentic family connection would prove essential when the final revelations about Elena's true motivations and sacrifices emerged through circumstances that would challenge everything we thought we understood about family loyalty, cultural preservation, and the profound lengths that love can motivate people to pursue for the well-being of those they hold most dear. Friday morning arrived with the bittersweet recognition that Elena's departure was imminent. Her doctor had confirmed complete recovery from surgery, and practical arrangements required her return to her apartment by Sunday evening. The approaching transition created urgency about consolidating the relationship improvements we had achieved, while establishing sustainable patterns for ongoing family connection. Elena's energy throughout Friday reflected determined focus on maximizing our remaining time together. She initiated conversations about future family gatherings, discussed her language learning goals with specific timelines, and shared detailed plans for maintaining regular communication after her departure. Her approach demonstrated commitment to preserving family relationships that had been strengthened through addressing interpersonal challenges directly. However, Elena's intensive focus on relationship maintenance also revealed underlying anxiety about whether the connections we had built could withstand geographical separation and return to normal household routines. Her careful attention to establishing communication schedules and visit planning suggested concern that family closeness might gradually diminish without deliberate effort to sustain it. The morning conversation between Elena and myself centered on practical arrangements for continuing our English learning sessions through video calls and structured conversation practice. Elena had researched online resources and identified community college programs that could supplement our informal instruction with formal language education. I want to reach level where I can read English books and understand television programs without translation, Elena explained with evident determination. This will help me participate more completely in American culture, while also allowing deeper conversations with you about topics that interest both of us. Her ambitious language learning goals reflected recognition that meaningful family relationships required communication capabilities that extended beyond basic functional interaction. Elena understood that building authentic connection with me necessitated developing vocabulary and cultural knowledge that could support substantive dialogue about complex topics. The conversation also revealed Elena's plans for community involvement that would utilize her cultural knowledge while providing opportunities for social connection and personal fulfillment. Elena had contacted local organizations about volunteer opportunities that combined her interest in supporting immigrant families with her desire to share Mexican cultural traditions. Community Center Director wants me to teach cooking classes for families who want to learn about authentic Mexican food, Elena said with obvious excitement. This work would help other people, while also giving me a chance to practice English and make new friends who share similar interests. Her volunteer plans demonstrated successful transition from family-focused identity to broader community engagement that could provide meaning and purpose independent of caregiving responsibilities. Elena's initiative in pursuing these opportunities reflected psychological growth that had emerged through our conversations about personal development and cultural contribution. David's response to learning about Elena's community involvement plans was enthusiastically supportive, expressing pride in his mother's commitment to education and cultural preservation. His encouragement validated Elena's choice to pursue activities that honored her heritage while building connections within her adopted community. "Mom, teaching cooking classes sounds perfect for you," David said during our family breakfast discussion. "You have incredible culinary skills and cultural knowledge that other people could really benefit from learning. This could also help you build friendships with people who appreciate Mexican traditions." Elena's pleasure in David's approval was evident, but I also observed her growing confidence in pursuing activities based on personal interest rather than family obligation. Elena's decision-making process increasingly reflected internal motivation and autonomous choice, rather than exclusive focus on pleasing family members or meeting external expectations. The afternoon brought unexpected complexity when Elena received a phone call from Carmen that appeared to deliver concerning news. Elena's side of the conversation, conducted entirely in Spanish, became increasingly emotional and urgent, suggesting that family circumstances in San Diego required attention or intervention. After concluding the call, Elena appeared visibly distressed and requested private conversation with David about family matters that might affect her departure timeline and living arrangements. The sudden shift in Elena's emotional state created anxiety about whether crisis situations might disrupt the positive family dynamics we had been building. David's conversation with Elena occurred in Spanish, preventing me from understanding the specific nature of Carmen's news or Elena's concerns about family obligations. However, their discussion appeared serious and involved careful consideration of alternatives and responsibilities that could impact Elena's immediate plans. Carmen's husband Roberto has been laid off from his job, David explained after their private conversation concluded. Carmen is working full-time as a nurse, but they are struggling financially with 3 children and cannot provide support if mom needs assistance. Carmen is worried about mom living alone without family nearby. The news created immediate complexity about Elena's living situation and long-term care arrangements that extended beyond her surgical recovery period. Roberto's unemployment had eliminated Carmen's family's capacity to serve as backup support system for Elena, potentially requiring alternative approaches to ensuring her safety and well-being. Elena's distress about Carmen's situation reflected both concern for her daughter's family and anxiety about her own independence and security. The financial pressure on Carmen's household eliminated options for mutual support that had provided psychological comfort for both mother and daughter during Elena's recovery period. "What does Elena want to do about this situation?" I asked, recognizing that family crisis required careful consideration of multiple competing needs and limited resources. David's response revealed the complexity of Elena's emotional conflict between desire for independence and recognition that practical circumstances might require different living arrangements. Elena wanted to maintain her autonomy while also acknowledging that isolated living without nearby family support created legitimate safety concerns. "Mom is considering whether she should move to Portland permanently to be closer to us," David said carefully, watching my facial expression for signs of reaction to this possibility. "She does not want to impose on our marriage, but she is worried about living alone without family backup if health problems develop." The prospect of Elena relocating to Portland created an immediate mixture of emotions that reflected the complexity of family relationships and competing loyalties. Elena's presence during her recovery period had initially created stress, but ultimately strengthened our family bonds through improved communication and mutual understanding. However, permanent relocation represented fundamentally different commitment level that would require careful consideration of privacy needs, household autonomy, and long-term relationship sustainability. Elena's temporary stay had been manageable, partly because it had clear endpoint that preserved marriage independence while accommodating family obligations. "What kind of living arrangement would Elena prefer if she decided to move to Portland?" I asked, hoping to understand whether Elena envisioned independent housing with nearby family support or more integrated household arrangements that could impact our marriage dynamics. Elena's response, communicated through David, revealed thoughtful consideration of family needs and relationship boundaries that demonstrated respect for our marriage, while also addressing her legitimate concerns about aging and potential health challenges that could require family assistance. "Mom would want her own apartment nearby, not to live with us permanently," David clarified. "She recognizes that married couples need privacy and independence, but she would like to be close enough for regular family dinners and to provide mutual support when needed." Elena's approach reflected sophisticated understanding of family relationship maintenance that honored both individual autonomy and collective responsibility. Her preference for independent housing with regular family contact demonstrated respect for marriage boundaries while also creating framework for ongoing mutual support and cultural connection. The conversation continued with practical discussion about Portland housing options, community resources for elderly residents, and timeline considerations for potential relocation. Elena's approach to decision-making involved careful research and planning rather than emotional reaction to Carmen's crisis. "Elena wants to visit Portland for a week in 2 months to explore neighborhoods and housing options," David explained. "She does not want to make permanent decisions based on temporary crisis But she also recognizes that planning for aging requires advanced preparation rather than emergency response. Elena's methodical approach to major life decisions reflected wisdom gained through decades of managing family responsibilities with limited resources. Her commitment to thorough evaluation before making permanent changes demonstrated emotional maturity and practical intelligence that commanded respect and admiration. Saturday morning brought renewed focus on Elena's immediate departure while maintaining awareness that future family configurations might be significantly different from current arrangements. Elena's potential relocation to Portland would require ongoing dialogue about family relationships and household boundaries that honored both togetherness and independence. Elena spent Saturday morning organizing her belongings and completing final preparations for her return to San Diego. However, her activities also included planning for a potential future move to Portland that required different types of preparation and research. I want to understand Portland weather, transportation, medical services, and community programs before making final decision about relocation, Elena explained during our morning conversation. Moving at my age requires careful planning to ensure success and happiness in new environment. Her thorough approach to relocation planning demonstrated commitment to making decisions based on comprehensive information rather than emotional reaction to family crisis. Elena's methodology reflected experience with major life transitions and understanding of factors that contributed to successful adaptation to new circumstances. The conversation also revealed Elena's growing confidence in her ability to build new social connections and community relationships in Portland based on her recent success with family relationship building during her recovery stay. Elena's experience with our household had provided evidence that she could adapt to different cultural environments while maintaining her authentic identity and values. Living in Portland would allow me to be closer to David while also giving opportunity to build relationships with new community, Elena observed thoughtfully. Mexican Cultural Center here has programs that interest me, and English classes could help me continue language learning with native speakers. Elena's recognition of Portland's cultural resources and educational opportunities demonstrated practical thinking about how relocation could support her personal development goals while also providing family proximity. Her approach integrated individual growth objectives with family relationship priorities in ways that honored both sets of needs. Saturday afternoon brought unexpected discovery that would fundamentally alter our understanding of Elena's motivations and the true nature of her family relationships. While helping Elena organize her belongings, I accidentally discovered a collection of documents that revealed information about her financial situation and personal circumstances that challenged every assumption we had made about her independence and decision-making autonomy. The documents, written in Spanish and requiring translation assistance from David, revealed that Elena's housing situation was far more precarious than she had communicated to us. Her apartment lease was ending in 6 weeks, and her landlord had declined to renew due to building renovation plans that would displace multiple elderly tenants. Elena's financial resources were also more limited than her confident presentation had suggested. Roberto's unemployment was not new information to Elena, but ongoing crisis that had been affecting her family for several months. Carmen's family had been providing financial support to Elena that Roberto's job loss now made impossible to continue. Elena has been facing housing and financial crisis for months, David said with obvious shock after reviewing the documents. She did not tell us about these problems because she did not want to burden us during her recovery period, or create pressure for us to provide solutions to her difficulties. The revelation fundamentally reframed Elena's entire stay with us and her careful behavior throughout the recovery period. Elena's apparent adaptation to our household routines had been influenced by knowledge that our home might represent her only stable housing option if family circumstances made independent living impossible. Elena's reluctance to contribute to household tensions or create interpersonal conflict reflected understanding that maintaining positive family relationships might be essential for her long-term security and well-being. Her careful accommodation of our preferences had been motivated partly by practical concerns about preserving family support systems during personal crisis. Why did Elena not tell us about these challenges when she first came to stay with us? I asked, struggling to understand why Elena had chosen to manage crisis situations privately, rather than seeking family support and collaboration. David's response revealed cultural dynamics and generational values that had influenced Elena's decision-making throughout her stay with us. Elena's reluctance to burden family members with her problems reflected deeply held beliefs about independence, dignity, and appropriate roles for elderly parents within adult children's lives. In Mom's culture, parents do not ask adult children for help unless absolutely necessary, David explained. She was hoping that Roberta would find a new job and that her housing situation would resolve independently. Mom only planned to discuss these issues with us if no other solutions were available. Elena's approach reflected values about family relationships that prioritized protecting adult children from parental problems rather than seeking collaborative solutions to shared challenges. Her cultural background had taught her that successful parenting required enabling children's independence rather than creating ongoing obligations or dependencies. The discovery of Elena's hidden circumstances created immediate urgency about addressing her practical needs, while also processing the emotional implications of her decision to manage crisis privately rather than seeking family support. Elena's choice to prioritize our comfort over her own security reflected sacrifice that demanded recognition and appropriate response. This revelation would transform our understanding of Elena's motivations and establish foundation for the most profound discoveries about family loyalty, cultural values, and the extraordinary lengths that love could motivate people to pursue for the well-being of those they held most dear. The turning point had arrived, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.